Today, I would like to present an idea once again, with which you can relatively quickly create a complete show or even smaller sections in your project. For this picture wall, the layout effect is used, and for the emergence of the individual pictures or videos, a fade. This works with PhotoVision, VideoVision, and stages. And at the end, I will show you another variation with a trick for stages, which could certainly be of interest to the one or other craftsman. Here we go. I'm here in stages. With my examples just now, you could always see a picture wall in the background. You could create such a picture wall by putting together smaller pictures in a collage. However, it is much easier to do this with the layout effect, which we have already presented in more detail in various videos. And that is why we are now using the effect to first create our picture wall. I'm going to drag the layout effect from the toolbox into the timeline. And then paste all the images and videos. And I'll arrange them one below the other so they're all displayed simultaneously. Stages has a convenient button for this process. In PhotoVision and VideoVision, you'd have to manually place the images on top of each other in the layout effect. Now, let's see what it does when I highlight the border of the layout effect. It arranges all the images in a grid. Thanks to the grid setting, I can change the edge spacing and the spacing between the images here. I can also specify how many columns or rows the layout should have. The images in the layout effect don't have a fade in for me. The fade out is set to don't fade out. I don't need to cut the individual pictures. The effect takes care of that. Instead of an even layout, a random layout can also look interesting. Don't take too many pictures overall, so you can still see the individual contents well. If there are missing pictures in a uniform grid, you can simply fill these gaps with colored rectangles. That's what I'm going to do now. I'll search for the dynamic rectangle shape in the Objects tab, add it to my image list in the Layout effect, change the color to match my themes, and when I mark the Layout effect again, I'll see where the rectangle was placed, and I won't have a black gap in my layout anymore. The place where the rectangle appears is determined by the order of the pictures. You can also change the order easily. And then I'll play it once as a test. And then we'll see that after 5 seconds, the rectangle simply disappears. We just have to give it the little tick in the properties as well. Then it won't fade away abruptly. For now, that's it with the background, because we want to show the pictures large in front of our picture wall. To do this, I first add all the images and videos to the track below the layout effect. If you were to play it like this now, it isn't really nice yet. The images would simply alternate in front of the picture wall and cover it. However, with fades in and fades out on the images, there would be a nice effect. That's why I leave the pictures marked as they all are now and give them all a fade in. The rectangle here from the geometric section is supposed to be it. Under Adjust, I choose 100% hardness and the direction from the center. I also use the same variant as a fade out, so again, a rectangle. Adjust from the center with 100% hardness. Additionally, it's recommended that you crop the photos and videos for the foreground images. That way, the individual images will always fill the entire visible image. There won't be any distracting borders. The picture wall will always be completely covered. That looks pretty good. I would now increase the display time for the marked pictures so there's a little more peace and calm in the process. Then let's look at this portrait photo again. We cropped this photo earlier with all the marked images. However, cropping is usually not the best solution for portrait formats, but of course you can intervene in a targeted manner. I'll push the lighthouse further forward here, then I'll set the aspect ratio back to keep. We now see the portrait format in front of the picture wall. Then I'll use the picture in front effect to fill the area holistically again. You can then adjust the picture in front effect as you like. Note importantly, for the rectangle overlay of the image to work on the picture before picture overall construct, you need to have a fade in with the image and a fade out with the image. And this is what it looks like. Surely you've noticed that the picture wall also contains a video. You might be asking, what about the video? What happens when it ends? All images have been left as is and are still visible even after their 5 seconds of display time, even if the layout effect in the timeline ends. Because the video was also left as is, its last image remains visible. The video just doesn't move anymore. But if you want the video to keep moving in the background picture wall, and in this case, even the video sound with the sea noise can be heard, you can just copy the entire collage and paste it behind the first collage. Video Vision or Stages users could also use the repeat effect. If you have a few videos in the collage, you might want to pay attention to which sound you want to hear and cut those videos to the same length. This layout could then be copied as many times as you want until the project's duration is filled. For the video that's shown large in the foreground, you can then simply turn off the sound because in my case the sound of the sea would already be heard from the background video. That's it for that. Let's go back to the layout itself. I'm going to remove the second one again here to make the video a bit clearer. Right now we're seeing a black background. If you don't want black here, you can choose any other color or gradients. I'm going back to the dynamic rectangle shape. If we now highlight the layout effect, we see the white from the rectangle. And of course, I could also set any other color again. I'll leave it white for now, and remember to enable Keep Within Bounds in the properties of the rectangle. Now here's another tip for you, if you want it to be more interesting rather than completely uniform. If you choose the random partition setting, it calculates a random arrangement. You can keep rolling new random arrangements until you find one you like. Through the variation setting, you can also influence how much the sizes or cuts of the images may vary. So you could copy different layouts and choose different settings for each one to create some variety in the background. But for my example, I'm going back to the uniform layout for now. I'll move this photo and show you a few more variation options. Of course, the pictures below should also have camera pans. It doesn't have to be anything flashy. A simple straight zoom is perfectly adequate here. I'll set the duration to the length of the image and then play it briefly. Now you can see a subtle additional zoom in the image. Overall, the timing down here is still relatively static. Feel free to vary the display time of the pictures, some longer, some shorter. You can also leave space between the foreground pictures so that they appear with a delay, which allows you to showcase the picture wall in the background. If you're using background music, it's also a good idea to time these inserts to match the music. These would be variations so that the whole thing doesn't become too monotonous. You can also add inscriptions. Here's an example for a rectangle. To do this, I'll enclose the rectangle in a flexi layer and then add a text object. Then, as always, I type in my text and format it. Note the crop content and crop aspect ratio settings on the flexi layer. This ensures the Flexico collage can be properly fitted into the layout, especially with these irregular layouts. In my case, I don't want any fade in or fade out for the text. So I go back to the text object and adjust the text animation there. I aim to avoid both fade in and fade out. To ensure the text is readable during play, I move the foreground images back a little and play it. Let's see then. The next two examples will be a bit more demanding. You could possibly have the image wall float. In stages, I can animate this with the 3D rotation live effect. In video vision, you might also be able to animate this with manual input directly on the layout, but that would be pretty time-consuming over time. So I'm dragging the 3D rotation live effect to the layout effect here in stages. Then you can immediately see that the image wall appears to be rotated, but I set the rotation back to 0 degrees because I want to adjust the size of the effect. And I do that in this state with the Shift key and the Alt key pressed to maintain the center point and aspect ratio of my 3D rotation effect. On the Y-axis, I then test how far my rotation can go. So here, from about -10 degrees to +10 degrees, and I animate this rotation, this slight movement, over a curve. As I said, this can only be done in stages. I had a sine A curve created with 3 oscillations. The height would still be too high here. That would be -180 degrees to 180 degrees. That's why I go to scale height and multiply by my factor 0.06 to get about -10 degrees plus 10 degrees. The curve is then automatically adjusted. But we still need to change something about our layout effect, because this rotation can only be carried out on active objects, not on abandoned ones. So we need to increase the display duration of the objects involved in the 3D rotation effect, so they can be redrawn during the rotation. I'll do this individually, but intelligent scaling could also be used. And I'll make all objects as long as the video. For this, I'll set all objects to abruptly fade out. Also here with the rectangle object, I remove the check mark to leave it. For the text animation, I change the fade out back to abruptly fade out again. And these images here are supposed to abruptly fade out after they have been played. Now I can copy the layout again, so that the background is present throughout the entire display duration of my foreground images. And now let's take another look at the 3D rotation. The effect duration has now been extended. My rotation would only occur at the beginning of the rotation section. But this tilting movement should happen throughout the entire display duration of the rotation section. And therefore, I'm going to go back to continuous here. You can adjust it during playback, as the images step forward individually in the background, always slightly this tilting movement. And lastly, I'm going to show a variant for Stages users who aren't afraid of hard work, where the prominence of the images isn't realized with a fade-in, but we use motion paths. I'll start again with the layout effect, and for clarity, I'll place the new images one below the other first, so that all are displayed at the same time. The layout effect takes care of the arrangement. All images have no fade-in, and as a fade-out, they don't hide the edge of the layout effect. I make it a bit narrower. I copy this layout and paste the copied one underneath the first one. The first one stays as the background, and I make my foreground from the copied one. And for this, I use the Stages function, Edit Object Unpack. I take the hint on board. And I confirm the defect actually taking place in the background has now been applied to the inner objects. You can see that the images here now have a motion path and are reduced. I remove the surrounding effect by right-clicking Remove Effect. Conveniently, our individual images are now here in a track, and if we look at the first image and compare it with the layout, you can see that the single image has exactly the same position as it has in the car effect. This is a great starting point to animate the foreground image now. I add another mark to this first image in motion pool mode and then another mark. I set this last mark to the original mark, and then I switch to the manual input to revise all the marks and their timing again. I select the first mark and remove the stand time, which is still from the unpacked effect. I set it to 0. Then I go to the second mark. This one is supposed to show the full screen, so I set Prepare and Higher to 100% each, and the center point for this full screen is 50%, 50%. This second time mark gets the stand time of 3 seconds. This means it will stay in this position for a while, and then I check the third marker. It can stay as it is. I move the insert of the first image back a bit, and when playing it, we see what our motion marks are doing now. The image seems to detach from the layout, steps forward, becomes full screen, and then steps back into its place in the layout. And that's the hard work now. This setting of the motion markers would now also be done for all the other images. I'll show it again. So select an image, add a brand, and add another brand. This third mark comes back to the starting mark. Then I edit the marks in manual entry. For the first brand, I remove the idle time. For the second stamp, I set the size to 100%. And the midpoint to 50.50. And also specify the standing time of 3 seconds. The third brand can remain as it is. And on we go to the next picture. Add 2 movement tokens. Put the last one back on the starting point. Select the first brand in the manual entry. Remove Tool Life. Select the second brand. Adjust width and height. And also the focal point. Set the standing time of 3 seconds here, and the third brand is allowed to stay as it is. I'll play it again in a moment. In any case, you have now seen some suggestions on the topic of picture walls. Just give it a try and also use other effects or overlays for the foreground images. And feel free to tell us what other ideas you've come up with. And if you liked the video, I would be very happy about a thumbs up again. Thank you.